Can we start with a Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are thrilled to see so many of our friends here today. Thank you for coming out and seeing what we've been working on recently. This is your hospital, so I hope you're pleased with it. We are. Before we start today's celebration, let me go ahead and share a personal observation with you. This is a great time to be an elected official at the hospital. We built this clinic without a property tax increase. Whoa! On time and under budget. One might say this is a new day at Mason Health. But before I go any farther, I'd like to introduce my two other hospital commissioners, Don Wilson and Gail Weston. Don is the representative from the board on the building committee, so if you like what you see today, go up and you want a hug or a pat in the back? Hug. Okay. Give Don a hug. Gail Weston serves on our finance committee, who oversees the construction costs of the project. And Gail, I understand you're going to be providing our guest a tour today too, so we appreciate that. Thanks, Gail. We're really, again, very pleased that we have such a great outpour of support from our community. A lot of that is the building, a lot of that may be the board, but also the majority of that is for our guest speaker today, the Honorable Ben Settle. No pressure, right, Ben? A project like this just doesn't happen. It takes a good team, all working together. Additionally, we need an exceptional leader to transform an organization of this magnitude. His name is Eric Mall. He is our Superintendent of Public Hospital District Number 1, our Chief Executive Officer, and the recent recipient of the Mason Thurston 2019 Innovation in Rural Medicine Award. Eric, this might be a good time for you to introduce your staff and thank them, and maybe also the construction team. Eric Mall.
Hey, thanks, Scott. So before I do, I want to just acknowledge the board. Again, we could not have done this without the leadership and support from you, Scott, Gail, and Don. Much appreciated. This could not have happened. Scott, you mentioned this is a new day for Mason Health. It certainly is. We're here to celebrate a new Mason Clinic, 60,000 square foot building. One of the very important things is it increases patient and physician access by 50%. We're increasing the number of exam rooms to 110, which is really important for the community. You'll see as you go through the tour, there's two x-ray rooms, expanded laboratory service that will help support this. But of course, we need to also bring the physicians. And so we have recruited 14 new providers between July 2019 and July 2020. Absolutely awesome group. And then as Scott mentioned, I do want to acknowledge two very important leaders that have made this possible. First, I want to acknowledge Mark Batty, Chief Operating Officer, who oversaw, Yeah, Mark's awesome. Actually, both these guys are awesome. So he oversaw many of the transformation efforts related to the integration of multiple clinic practices, really brought a great team of leaders underneath that to support this transformation in the clinics. And then next, Rick Smith, Chief Financial Officer, who's whose financial expertise ensured we navigated a very complex bond financing with an extremely favorable outcome. Quite frankly, I never would have thought I would have seen a interest rate of 2.53%. I like saying that. So, as Scott mentioned, special occasions like this deserves a special speaker. We have someone like that in the Honorable Ben Settle. Before becoming a federal district judge in 2007, Ben served Mason County for over 30 years, acting as legal counsel for such organizations as Mason General Hospital, Mason County Public Utility Districts 1 and 3, Hiawatha, Mason County Transit, Shelton School Districts, Taylor United, Hood Canal Communications, Hiawatha. You kind of get the picture. This is a testament that Ben is the ultimate Mason County supporter. It was my privilege to work with Ben the first 3 years I worked at Mason General Hospital, and it is my honor to introduce him today as our speaker.
Thank you for that introduction. It was just another one of the ordinary winter days in Western Washington in the late 1950s. Rain, low-lying, gloomy clouds hanging over the waterfront mills in Shelton, with a very tall smokestack prominent in the foreground. The boy, around 10 years old, was riding in a car driven by his father. He was peering out the window of a 1954 Oldsmobile as they traveled down the hill of Olympic Highway South, and he saw the small town of Shelton confined in a valley. The boy doesn't recall whether what he was thinking he actually expressed to his father or that he kept the thought to himself. But one thing he is still sure of. He said, or only mused, "I don't know where I will live when I grow up, but it won't be Shelton." Of course, your speaker was that young boy. I was traveling with my dad on a Saturday morning when he would go to the Shelton General Hospital to read x-rays that had been taken earlier in the week. He was the only radiologist in the South Puget Sound, so towns like Centralia, McCleary, and Shelton were on his circuit. The fact that I would spend 40 wonderful years in this community is in part a testimony to the sense of humor that God that I believe in has. The only place I recall ever excluding as a place to settle down was precisely the one in which I did. It was a Bedford Falls kind of town, in which I seemed to have known everybody, and I recognize at least half the faces here today. Everybody seemed to know me. It was a wonderful place to raise 5 children and live the life of a small-town lawyer. It seemed somehow fitting then that the son of this regional radiologist would, in 1977, join B. Franklin Houston in the practice of law. And it wasn't long before Houston passed the baton of general counsel for Mason General Hospital to me, a post I held for 30 years until July 2007, when I was appointed to the United States District Court in Tacoma. Being a hospital general counsel required knowledge of so many areas of law: medical standards of care, human resources, federal and state regulatory laws in multiple areas of oversight and compliance, as well as contract law. Because Mason General Hospital, now Mason Health, is owned by a public entity, the laws of public works apply, and large contracts usually must go out to public bid. Frank Houston told me that in one such contract for radiology equipment, when Houston asked Dr. Settle what his specification for equipment were, the answer was that he had only one specification, that it had to have Picker on the nameplate. But we came here today to officially open this clinic and recognize the importance of this facility and that it will have on the delivery of excellent health care in this rural community. My desire is to first speak briefly to the larger blessing that is the community in which this wonderful building will be dedicated to serve. It's not difficult to take for granted what gems this town and county are. Have you ever contemplated what a unique town this is? Most towns that entered the 20th century in Western Washington as small, vital centers of commerce and industry went into the 21st century as slowly shrinking towns, which, if they existed at all, were now no longer self-contained communities, but only suburbs of some larger metropolitan area. Yet Shelton retains an important place as the county seat of a county that's still a recreational mecca and boasts the second largest number of miles of waterfront in all the state, much of it freshwater lakes. It hosts some of the most productive shellfish beds in all the country and still has multiple mills producing wood products. How many small towns can you think of that are not only the county seat and only incorporated city in the county, but also have their own airport, thriving hospital, and weekly newspaper? It's still a one high school town that could be the drop back for Friday night lights. To keep such a fine and robust community relevant and growing does not happen without men and women of uncommon leadership and vision. When it comes to these qualities, the hospital district has had this in spades. I've had the distinct blessing and honor of serving leaders in this organization for 3 decades, and I've watched it grow even stronger in the more than a decade since I passed the baton of general counsel to Rob Johnson. Leadership for this publicly owned organization begins with its elected officials. Any citizen who has attained the age of majority can seek the office of commissioner. Fortunately for this community, not just any citizens have stepped forward to provide the decades of vision and governance for this vital community. I've worked for and with true pillars of the community like Dick Engel, Don Wilson, who I think is 31 years now into service here, Ken Fretzen, Chuck Walton, Tom Weston, Nancy Truxas, Bill McComb, Jack Wright, Bill Batstone. Add to that Scott Hilburn, who first served over 10 years in the 70s and 80s, stepped off and served as mayor of Shelton. And then in 2006, he returned to active duty with the district where he has served ever since. And though I did not have the pleasure of serving Gail Weston, I know from my years of knowing her that she has carried on the tradition of excellence, bringing her broad knowledge and experience from the banking industry. These are people who came out of the business community with superb skills and acumen in business organization and leadership. While there is a modest statutory base salary, the motivations of each of these exemplary people was not the little financial reward that the office provided, but rather it has been the extraordinary commitment and dedication to making their community stronger and sustainable. In my view, the most important decision the Board of Commissioners makes is the employment of its hospital administrator, also serves as the hospital superintendent of the hospital district. On this score, the commission has hit back-to-back-to-back home runs. It would be difficult to describe just how fortunate the hospital has been to have people of such great talent and experience. It's made the hospital the object of admiration throughout the state of Washington. Our leaders here have also been leaders in state organizations and even national organizations. The commission broke the glass ceiling when they appointed Jean Lee administrator. She was followed by Bob Apple, who could have gone on to lead hospitals 3 and 4 times the size of Mason General. But he, like many of us, had a devotion to this community and organization because he stayed, he was able to take this hospital to the highest level of service to the community and brought resources to aid in that effort. One resource he brought with the commissioner's participation was our current administrator, Eric Mall, who served Bob and the commissioners as the chief financial officer through times of challenge and growth. Like his predecessor, Bob, he is one who could be leading much larger organizations in the urban medical scene, but had a vision and a plan developed in partnership with the current commission to make Shelton the home of one of the most well-respected medical centers in rural Washington state. But building's contributions to the delivery of excellent health care are only as good as those who provide the services within the walls of the hospital and the clinics. Leadership here has striven and succeeded in recruiting and hiring medical staff, nurses, and support staff that makes all this work. We are grateful for the strong medical community that has labored in the field of hospital and clinical medicine. We've had the blessing of so many outstanding primary care physicians and specialists. In recent years, we've witnessed the retirement of doctors who invested their entire life's work here, like doctors John Butler, Tim Weber, Chris Benoyer, Doris Wilson after her years of service in the mission field. And it's great to see Dean Gushy here, who is the medical director, who has served for many, many years, first in the emergency room and now medical director. There, of course, are many more who are presently giving outstanding patient care, too many to mention. One person who must be mentioned is not a healthcare provider. She just happens to be someone who served the commissioners and administrators for a very long time with grace and unbelievable effectiveness, Shelley Dunnington. The fact that I would spend 40 wonderful years in this community, well, get to my last page. I did number them. There can be no exaggeration of the significance of this medical community and what it has had on the quality of life for those who live and work in Shelton and Mason County. It's frankly too easy to take for granted what has been built here over the years. I suggest that you now pause for just a moment. Try to imagine what this community would be like had we not had the leadership that preserved and so dramatically enhanced this economic engine that has provided top-tier medical care to this community. And while you're doing that, take a moment of silence to call to your memory those who are no longer here who have contributed to the success that we witnessed today. Have you got an idea what this community would be without all that surrounds us here in the Mason Health Campus? So we here dedicate this new facility to the end that top quality health care for all inhabitants will continue to be provided. And I ask you, join me in thanking all those who've made this day of new beginnings come to pass. And thank all of you for the great honor you've extended to me to let me be part of this magnificent community achievement and celebration.
My goodness. Am I so pleased that we invited Ben to come down and join us today, and that dedication speech was just wonderful. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it very much. We've got a ribbon cutting ceremony here in a few minutes. We've got some photos way in the back that Cooper Studios has this little, what do you call it? Photo booth. Thank you. It's back there anyway. And then we also have some more tours available if you'd like to stick around for those. We've got refreshments. Jen Capps, did I forget anything?
No.
Okay, good. Thank you again all for coming. Appreciate it.